I've never heard this talked about before, but the Norse creation story is insane. Let's go ahead and get started. Before the world began, there was a winter that lasted several thousand times longer than everything that's happened since then. Eventually, as with every eternal darkness, several things began to spill out. Among the first of which were Niflheim, world of fog, and Muspelheim, world of fire. In the Fogland, there was one or a couple of fountains that poured out infinite water, covering everything in ice except the border to the world of heat, which was a whole other area. The combination of these elements clashing created a sort of venom inside that void between them, where the ice melted and froze over and over and over, and all this dripping venom eventually it made a guy. The first guy. This is Ymir. And this is where stuff starts to get rapidly out of hand. Around the time the primordial pool of poison created the giant of all giants, the deadliest force in the world just came into creation over there, and he has a sword now. This is Surtur, ruler of Muspelheim, which may very well mean, if translated, home of the guy who will destroy the world. That's cool. So he wakes up and he just starts swinging his big goddamn sword at the ice because he wants to. He does this like forever. I assume at this point, after having been born, Ymir is just taking a nap. But because Surtur cannot stop swinging his sword, eventually, from the ice, he thaws out Old Bessie. Yep, the order of primeval beings entering creation goes, and I'm quoting, guy bigger than the planet, guy who's gonna ruin everything, and then a cow with massive titties big enough to create 4 rivers of ever-flowing milk. So Ymir wakes up, grabs those honkers, and goes to town. It's kind of funny to me that the stupid joke that people make about, oh, who's the craziest guy that at one point decided to drink cow milk? And they usually think it's some dude named Carl or Toby or Kevin in medieval times wearing a coif, but according to the Vikings, it's actually the second thing that anyone ever did, next to that thing that Tobuscus did in Minecraft. The cow freaks out, losing its nutrients, and starts licking the ice to get the salt inside. That's the next thing that happens. And this is where things get even crazier than poison creating the first guy who wanted milk. I believe, well, Ymir drank, the cow licked, and emerging from the ice with no explanation is Buri. First of the Norse gods, just yanked from the ice after being licked for 3 days straight. I'm guessing he was the source of salt. Speaking of salt, Ymir, happy and with a belly full of warm milk, takes a nap and starts to sweat like hell. Buri gets up and walking around on baby legs kinda just goes off to do his own thing for a minute. He leaves the story. While Ymir sleeps, the absolute stink of his armpits and thighs creates little oceans of sweat, and emerging from each stank pit were his children. This armpit lady, this armpit dude, and the 6-headed evil child from beneath his loins. This guy's got 6 heads and he's made from ball sweat. I want to fight him in D&D. Oh yeah, also the 6-headed dude craps out a guy named Burgelmeyer. This little family of monsters just waddle around a bit being evil because they're made of poison and cow milk sweat. And then Buri comes back with his son, Bor. I don't even think Buri knows how he did that. They look at this awful smelling pile of a family and instantly decide that war should be waged eternally. Some amount of time passes and they keep hitting stalemates with more giants showing up inexplicably. Then Bor, son of Buri, gets a look at the voluptuous Bestla, a lady giant of the 3rd generation, and it says they get married, so let's go with that. Bing bang boom, 3 beautiful half-giant toddlers. Their names, Rage, Desire, and Action. Or very loosely, Woden, Willy, and Way. Being half-giant, they were the first half-good, half-evil beings, in a basic way. They burst out of Mama Giant, weapons in hand, and raged against the now numerous army of giants. I think they kinda just ran past everyone and sliced into this overwhelmingly obese giant all-father thing, Ymir. Real quick, here's a fun survival fact. Milk is filtered blood. They share very similar nutrients, and many cultures drink animal blood as a sort of liquid meat. Okay, back to the story. So this bloated fat guy who does nothing but drink milk spews out a nearly infinite amount of blood. At this point in the Poetic Edda, a lot of characters stop being mentioned ever again. We can then assume that along with the giants who drowned in the blood, so did some of our favorite characters. Buri, Bor, the sweat babies, the cow probably. Thanks to Odin and family, everyone died, except the Odin brothers, and also the giant that I mentioned earlier. What's his name? Burgelmeyer. He and his wife throw together a boat, hop on that shit, and sail away on the flood of blood. They leave the story for a minute. Also, don't forget that Surtur is not even involved in this. He's still in a different area swinging his sword. I guess he's fine. With everything and everyone now very quiet, these three gods picked up the enormous corpse and carried it to the gap between heat and cold. The next part is my favorite thing that happens in very few stories. I love this kind of idea, and I really wish it was reimagined in like an animation. For the next few years, the three brothers worked to build the world, all 9 realms, from the pieces of Ymir's body. The blood distilled and became the ocean. His flesh became soil, his skeleton became the rocks, and his skull was placed as a mantle that became the sky. They hucked all of his brain matter into the sky, and that just became clouds. Midgard itself, the realm that we're in, is protected by or made from his eyelashes. Which is kinda cool, cause you see Midgard from between your eyelashes. That's interesting. Also, there are 4 dwarves that the gods invented to hold up the corners of Ymir's skull. Their names, nowadays, are North, South, East, and West. Yep, your compass is made of dwarves. Lastly, sparks from Surtur's sword swinging that's still going on, they were stolen and placed in the night sky. A couple of horses with chariots carry the 2 biggest sparks, being the sun and the moon, ever pursued by wolves that personify mockery and hatred. From all this, unified by a big tree that showed up in the middle, the 9 realms came into being. I think Odin only meant to make like 8 or 1. The 9th exists because, all while this was happening, the giant that escaped with his wife built Jotunheim at the edge of the world. Once all that business was finished, the 3 brothers wiped their hands clean and then immediately got bored because Midgard was too quiet. Here's another open area as to who did what, so I'll just go ahead and pick an interpretation. Let's say that life was bubbling all around the other realms, and the 3 gods took a walk on the beach. Them being Odin and probably his brothers still. While they're walking, Odin's brother slams his toe into a curvy piece of driftwood. Poor guy. But then Odin said that the driftwood looked like a guy. Then the other brother slammed his toe into the second piece of driftwood. Odin did one of the 2 things that makes humans. He breathed on the wood. The bark on the driftwood peeled back, revealing a couple of peoples. One had a peenie and the other had a vagini. One brother, Willie the Thinker, gave them intelligence. And then the other, Way, gave them the power to see and hear and talk and smell. At this point, time begins to pass. Other gods show up, probably from the ice or something else, and one of them is Odin's wife now. The giants over in Jotunheim pump out countless evil inbreds, and one of them is Loki now, who later becomes more like a blood brother to Odin, not so much his adopted son. The rest keeps going, wars keep waging, but hey, that's everything that happened in the beginning. A couple notes here, all this info is from the Poetic Edda, mainly something called Volspa, where a lady called a vulva talks to Odin. There's also a different poem where a giant battles Odin with riddles and stuff, and he loses. It mentions some of this stuff. Norse culture was majorly orally told, most of it being lost a long time ago save for these poems. Then, after Christianity attacked, some Christian asshole named Snorri in the early 1200s, or whoever wrote it a couple years ago, added more to Norse culture. But the writing is riddled with shit like, the stupid dummy-dumb northerners who did not know about the loving savior Jesus Christ believed this. He also Christianized the story with bias, like the thing about breathing life into people, which is like, why? He was a politician though. Snorri's story is crazy. If you want more old world myths and stories, which I definitely would like to do, drop some suggestions in the comments. Irish folktales are fucking hilarious, and I might do that next. Thanks for watching, genuinely. This was a fun video.